Today, Open Source Securities talking to Frank Karlitschek, the founder and CEO of Nextcloud. Holy cow, I'm excited to have Frank here because I feel like European digital sovereignty and Nextcloud have been just like on the top of the headlines for months now. So Frank, welcome so much.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Okay, so why don't you just start out by telling us kind of who you are, what is Nextcloud, and why you're here, and we'll go from there. Because this one, there's a lot of ways we could take this one.
Yeah. Well, I'm old, so there's a lot to say.
Welcome to the club,
So,
man.
I mean, yeah. Well, I started to do software development in the 90s. And of course, then came across open source, got in contact with the KDE community. And since then I was really fascinated about like the concept of open source, that you can really, what software is running on your computer and you can tinker with it and you can like inspect it and improve it and so on. And of course, the computer was standing in front of me, right? It was like a desktop. Obviously, there was no cloud at the time. So you basically were in full control of your digital life here, because you have the software, you have the hardware, and this felt really good and powerful. And then of course in the 2000s, cloud came along, and this meant that like the data is no longer on my device, it's somewhere else, and also some software running that I don't even know what it is. I cannot check it, I cannot improve it. It's just some software that is out of my control. And basically, as a developer, this felt really bad because I turned from a developer into just a customer, basically. And you're no longer like really someone who can really build things and control things. And of course, from a security perspective, it's also not, you just suddenly have to trust other people to do the right thing. And I didn't need to trust anyone before because I could do everything myself. And this was at the time where I thought, okay, there must be some kind of open source answer to this cloud trend, basically, because the cloud also brought like very powerful web applications, like collaboration tools, communication tools, collaborative editing of documents, and lots of cool things. And I thought, but this doesn't necessarily need to run on some hyperscaler. This can also run like on a computer I control. So I thought, why not build a software that has all these powerful communication, collaboration features and is fully open source, and you can just deploy it wherever you want, like from a Raspberry Pi for your friends and family up to a huge cluster for millions of users. And this is how I started. It's basically 16 years ago.
Now, was it Nextcloud when you started, or was it something else when you started?
There's a bit of a complex history. So it was first started under a different name. It was called OwnCloud.
Yep, I remember.
And I developed it and built up the community at the beginning, and then I got in contact with some other people, and together we decided, okay, let's start a company around it, because at the beginning it was just like a fun hobby project. And when we built the company, a lot of things went wrong. So it was just the wrong people, the wrong setup. And basically then, 10 years ago, we needed to do a reboot, basically. So most of the developers basically left the company, and we founded Nextcloud together. And now we do everything open source, because OwnCloud was only partly open source and it's community oriented and there's more features and so on. So it was basically some kind of reboot 10 years ago.
Nice. And yes, we should clarify that while Nextcloud is a company, all of your tooling is completely open, and anyone can obviously run it at any time on their own stuff, which is really freaking cool, because that's my cup of tea, obviously. So awesome. Okay, Frank. So why don't you tell us, like, what is Nextcloud for anyone who might not know what that is?
Yeah. So it all started with the file management at the beginning. So something is called file signature. A lot of people know it like as Dropbox or Google Drive or Microsoft OneDrive. Basically a service where you can upload and sync your files, share it with other people, have it on your phone, on your desktop, and so on. Basically, managing your files. This is how it all started. But for me, it became clear that this is only the beginning, because it's nice to have all your documents available on all your devices. But at the end, you want to do something with them. You want to view them. You want to edit them. You want to communicate around them. So for me, it was clear that the whole area will expand into more like a collaboration software. And this is also what others are doing, right? I mean, Google Drive, you cannot really get alone anymore because it's just part of Google Workspace, where you also have documents and the chat and the calendar and everything. And there's also it's the same for Microsoft, where there's a Microsoft OneDrive, but it's just part of Microsoft 365. And this is a little bit the same journey we are doing here with Nextcloud. So Nextcloud can synchronize your files, but it also has mail, calendar, and contacts. It chat and video conferencing. It has an Office component to edit your documents collaboratively with others, photo management, note taking, and a lot of more things. So it's basically, everything you need to work together between people over the internet.
Yeah, right. It's, I mean, I hesitate to say the word modern office suite, but it's basically all of
Yeah.
the things you would expect in an online, I guess, I don't even call it, office suite is too old,
Mm.
but you get the idea. Right?
But that's what it is. That's what it is. I mean, there are lots of names for that over the years, right? At some point, it was called groupware, or like an online office, or I think a lot of people call it a collaboration suite nowadays. But
Oh, there you go.
lots of different names.
I like that name.
Yeah.
We'll call it that. Okay. Now, I don't know how to ask this in a nice way, so I'm just gonna ask it. I feel like digital sovereignty is a huge topic at the moment for many reasons, right? We could probably spend days discussing like the geopolitical reasons digital sovereignty is now an interesting topic, but I feel like every time I read about digital sovereignty, especially in Europe, Nextcloud is somewhere inside of that discussion. So I will let you decide how you want to answer that question and where you want to kind of take it, but I feel like the thing, it is amusing to me that I suspect a couple of years ago, a lot of people would have been like, Nextcloud, whatever, why do I need that? And now I feel like it is everywhere and no one is asking that question. So, okay, I will let you take this one from here.
Yeah, thanks. So, it's interesting because, as I said, I did software development open source for a long time, like in the 90s. And the 90s, the whole IT stuff was not political. It was just done by some nerds in the basement, right, coding along. But like the politicians didn't care, like managers and companies didn't care. This is just some IT stuff, boring, right? But this really has changed because nowadays everybody understands that it's really, really important who has access to the data, who can switch off my applications, who can, like, I don't know, increase the prices and I have to pay because there's no choice to migrate away and so on. So basically the importance of this nerdy stuff is like now on the top. I mean, a lot of companies, a lot of governments, they really think about it. Where is the data? Who has access and so on. And this was, of course, freedoms that I would say at the beginning were connected to the term open source, but open source was always a bit like hard to explain to other people because you ask, what is open source? I say, it's software licenses. And then, okay, what could be more boring than software licenses, right? I mean, this is really a terrible way to promote this idea. And this is why the term digital sovereignty is a little bit better, in my opinion, because it basically means that, individuals, organizations, governments are in control of their digital destiny in a way. And because Nextcloud can be run wherever you want, right? You can install it in a hosting center you trust on your own infrastructure. You can decide who has access to it and who has not. And because it's open source, you can audit the software, right? You can look inside and look for backdoors or something, right? And you can even improve it yourself. So it basically gives you a lot of control, a lot of sovereignty over your digital life. And so this is a bit of the thing at the moment. And nowadays, a lot of people want to be more in control of their future.
Well, and let's touch on that a little bit, because I think this is complicated and hard to understand and explain sometimes. And so I'll put it in the context of many times in the past, the hyperscalers, right? Like Microsoft and Google and whoever have been asked, can you guarantee that my data will stay in this country or out of that country, or some sort of guarantee about where your data is? Because the reason being that, for example, if I'm a European and my data ends up in the United States, now the United States can subpoena and request and do things with my data, even though I'm not in that country and I have no relation to that country necessarily. And historically, all of these companies have said, we cannot guarantee anything about where your data is. And quite frankly, a lot of these systems they have are kind of magical in the context of like the data just ends up places where it might need to be for some reason. And so I think that the data sovereignty aspect of this is, for me, I find it super fascinating because like when we think of Europe, right? Like as an American, Europe is this amorphous blob, right? We think of it kind of like in the same way we think of the United States, where it's like this giant country with a bunch of states, but no one really knows what that means and whatever. It's just a place we all live. Europe is what, like 200, not 200. It's what is it, like 47 countries or something? I forget the number, but like every one of them has its own sovereignty, its own rules, its own laws, and they take it super seriously. So it's like a very, very interesting problem, I think.
Yeah, there are a lot of things to say here. So there's of course also the European Union, right? Like a body that
Right.
is harmonizing the laws between all the states, and that's a good thing. And the EU decided that we want to have the GDPR, which is strong data protection laws. It has like several things that you need to protect the data of your users, your customers, for example. You cannot really give it to someone else without and so on. A lot of requirements there, which I think it's common sense. It's a good idea. But unfortunately, the US does not have this kind of legislation. I think
Oh, I know.
California introduced it a little bit, but it's definitely not on the same level. And this is then an interesting challenge for European organizations because they cannot really give the data to the hyperscalers because then it would basically leave this protection that is required by law. And this is a challenge, of course, and the politicians, the American US politicians and the European politicians noticed many years ago that this is a problem, and they created like agreements. Yeah, it first started with the Safe Harbor Agreement, and then later the Privacy Shield Agreement, and now we are at the third version, which is the Data Protection Framework. And this is basically a piece of paper which says like it's fine. You can give the data to the hyperscalers and they say that they're protecting it, and it's fine. But of course, it's not so easy because if you're an American company, you need to follow American law. And there are American laws like the Patriot Act and the Cloud Act and so on. And there's this law basically say that under a lot of conditions, a lot of people who have some interest in this data can have access. And this is then violates, or this goes against the European law. So there is a bit of a problem here. And this creates like a lot of, tension, basically.
Yeah. Oh man. That's a 2-hour conversation in itself right there.
Yeah, at least.
But let's not, I don't want to dwell on that too much, I guess, because I feel like the legal aspects of this, like if you're getting your legal advice from Frank and myself, you probably have a lot bigger problems than than anything else. So not a lawyer, but okay. So like, let's talk about Nextcloud a little bit, because I want to get into some of the nitty gritty details of this, which is, it is comically easy to set this tool up. And for anyone who doesn't know, I'll have links in the show notes to all of the instructions, but like fundamentally, this is meant to be a system that like, me as a person, I can just get it and run it. Now, I will say it has to be run on a public IP. That is one of the like requirements to set this up, which, I mean, I understand why, but like, I also like, I'd love to run into my lab.
Actually, that's not true. That's actually not true. I mean, a lot of people actually run it on a private network alone, basically air-gapped, disconnected from the internet. For example, if you really have super high security requirements and you have like an internal network in between different offices of your company, or sometimes a government organization have the internal private network, then you can install Nextcloud there and it's not even connected to the internet.
It needs a valid certificate. That's what it is, isn't it? I
Yes.
don't remember. I remember I tried to set this up internally and I was like, this is too much hassle. I'll just get a VM. And I don't remember exactly why at the moment. It's been a while since I've done this, but it's super easy, right? You literally run a couple, like what you have a Docker command basically, and it's magic.
It's one of the design goals basically to make the running this thing as easy as possible because I mean, it's great that you have this open source software and you can decentralize everything, but if people cannot run it, then what's the point, right? So it was always the goal to make it like stupidly easy to set it up. And at the beginning, it was like even easier. It was just you unpack a zip file basically in a web server root, and then it works. It can even do this in a subdirectory. It can create its own database. You don't even need shell access. So this was the original design goal, and it still sort of works like that. Unfortunately, with more and more features we added, also more and more components that you need, right? Like different services, microservices configured in certain ways, and then it all became, unfortunately, just a little bit more complicated. And this is why nowadays we recommend the Docker container, because there's everything's in there. It's nicely configured. You basically don't need to do a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I couldn't imagine trying to set this up without the
Mm.
Docker container.
Yeah.
It would take me a month just to read the docs, I suspect. Now, I will say that I applaud you as a company, because most companies, when they have like an open source version or something, they make it so hard to install or use that they're obviously trying to shepherd people into their walled garden. And that's not the strategy you've taken. So
No, but
like,
then you have to hurt your own community with that. That's stupid.
well, I mean, I agree with you as old open source nerds, but obviously a lot of startups today don't function like that, right? They see open source
Yeah.
as the advertising wing of their company, as a
Mm.
way to lure people in and then trap them in the bog. And you're
Yeah,
not
yeah.
taking that approach. So I honestly did want to ask like the business model question about this, because I don't think what Nextcloud is doing is necessarily a typical open source business model, but I feel like it is a really good business model, because you're
Mm.
like you said, you're building a community, and you also have the commercial piece, which is like how to make commercial open source work is definitely one of the challenges we have today, like as just an open source
Yeah.
universe.
No, that's true, of course. And I think we found a very nice business model that works good for us, but I wouldn't say this is like this works for everyone. It's just worked for us, and we developed this over 10 years. We fine-tuned it all the time. And so, but the idea is to explain it quickly is that, as you said, everything is open source. So we actually don't have any proprietary pieces. Sometimes people always expect, yeah, there must be some special features that you only get as a paying customer. No, it's basically all open source. It's all the same. What we are offering, how we make our money, is that we provide or we offer support contracts, enterprise subscriptions. So if you run Nextcloud in a mission critical way, then you can get the support from us. Then you can directly contact the developers themselves if something is not working. We have access to some knowledge base for if you really want to scale it via Kubernetes to millions of users, then you can example configurations from there. There are some certifications that we provide to paying customers, like special accessibility certification, stuff like that. So there are a bunch of services around that you don't need as a home user. So as a small organization, you don't need. But if you're a big government organization, if you're a huge university or something, you probably want to work together with us because we are the specialists who can help you. And this is how we make our money. And it's not so unusual. And this is also the Red Hat business model, or
Yep.
the canonical Ubuntu business model, right? And or MariaDB business model. So in my opinion, it's one of the best.
Agreed. I mean, I don't know if you know this. I spent a decade at Red Hat, so I'm
Yeah.
incredibly familiar with the business model, and I agree. It's a lovely way to do this. And I mean, like,
Um,
and the customers you're dealing with, like, I can't. I think it was what the country of Austria recently like
yeah.
transitioned all of their like that's the scale of that is mind boggling. I mean,
Mm.
yes, a country is not going to be like, oh, we'll just self-support, right? Like they have a vested interest in working with you, and they're probably honestly going
Exactly.
to save money over the time it would take having
Of
people
course.
figure this crap out on their own, right?
Yeah, of course. No, we have more and more huge organizations switching to Nextcloud. There's also the Ministry of Education in France. There are like
Nice.
several million users. And I'm actually also a little bit proud that the code is basically the same. It's like a really interesting scalability architecture. That the code you're running on the Raspberry Pi is like 99% the same that you would run on a huge
Wow.
cluster.
That's
Um,
epic.
of of course, there are some differences with clustered databases and clustered Redis caches and so on. But most of the thing is really the same.
That's awesome. Holy cow, I love that. That's one of those things that is so hard to explain. And like, you're one of the few people I've talked to that's in this universe. Is it's so easy for us to build a tool that works for like 1 or 10 people. But once you hit like millions of things happening at the same time, the scalability issues turn into these ridiculous problems that like no normal developer will ever even imagine, right? On a day-to-day basis. That's so cool. Okay. So we're running the clock down a little bit here. So I also, Frank, wanted to talk to you a little bit about, like, you've got this tool, right? You're coming in, you're helping with sovereignty, you're helping people kind of free themselves and put them back into control. And there's two pieces to this story I would love to have you kind of tell me about. So anyone who, I suspect the vast majority of people who listen to this podcast are familiar with Cory Doctorow, right? And he's had an enormous amount to say about, digital sovereignty and what, he calls it enshittification. And there's all these moving parts going on right now. And so I kind of have a two-part question for you, really. So first of all, there's the angle of, we're seeing a lot of cloud providers kind of starting to turn up the ratchet. And so I'm curious what kind of interest you're starting to see outside of maybe Europe. Is this a thing we're seeing? Are we seeing these companies trying to kind of bring some things back in to rid themselves of some of these hyperscaler type things? So then the other piece, Frank, is like, how do you make sure Nextcloud doesn't end up on like that enshittification treadmill for its users? So, okay, I'll let you start with the first part about just like digital sovereignty, the interest you're seeing in just not maybe European country governments.
Yeah, there are of course a lot of other benefits running Nextcloud beside the digital sovereignty. For example, another thing we can do is a big cloud provider, service provider can take Nextcloud, white label it under their own name and offer it as a service to their customers. Because you cannot really do this with Microsoft or Google. Microsoft 365 comes only from Microsoft and Google Workspace only from Google. But if you then some other service provider, cloud provider, then what can you do? Then you're out of business very soon. But you can take Nextcloud and you can white label it and you can offer it to your customers. For example, one of our bigger customers is America Mobile. They're like a huge service provider in Mexico, but they also have basically all of South America as customers. I don't know, 250 million customers or something.
Whoa.
It's gigantic. And for example, they take Nextcloud and offer it under the name Cloud Drive to their customers under their own name. And that's something that a lot of companies do all over the world. So that's something that's also Nextcloud can do and the hyperscalers not, which is interesting.
Wow, that's really cool. Well, they have no reason to do that, right? They want their name all over everything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then the second question was, of course, how do we prevent that Nextcloud becomes evil basically tomorrow?
Yeah, right.
So,
right.
I mean, that's that's the question, right? So I think we have some guardrails built in. For example, the first thing is that everybody who contributes to Nextcloud, code to Nextcloud, and these are thousands of people, they keep their own copyright on the software. So we don't have a contributor license agreement. So the Nextcloud code base is basically shared, owned by thousands of people. And this prevents any evil license change from our side. So we, for example, could not change the license. There are a lot of companies who trying to make it like proprietary or we need to optimize some quarterly numbers, I don't know, and then suddenly it's no longer open source. This cannot happen with Nextcloud because we would need the approval from thousands of people and this is not possible. So it's basically guaranteed to always stay open source. It's in the way very similar to the Linux kernel, which I think gives you a nice guarantee. And then the second thing is if we as a company would make some mistakes or some things that our customers or users don't want. For example, we develop the software in the wrong direction, or we build in restrictions, or we do bad quality, or we increase the prices a lot, or whatever bad thing. Someone can always take it and fork it and turn it into a better direction, right? So we think we're doing a good job steering in the right direction, but if people disagree, they can do it themselves, fork it, and do something different. So there's basically always this safety net there. So if we somehow, don't make our customer and our community happy anymore, then someone else will. And I think this is a very nice guarantee that's built in.
Fair enough. Yeah, yeah. Okay, and I do have kind of a follow-up to that then. Something I do not know the answer to, and I should, I feel like, is so do you host Nextcloud for customers, or do customers always run it on their stuff?
We intentionally don't host Nextcloud because
Okay,
if we would offer a hosting service, then we would become like the de facto official place. And I
right.
don't like that. It's all about decentralization. So you can get Nextcloud by hosting it yourself, or you can go to one of the many service providers who offer you Nextcloud. And there are lots of them, but we don't do that.
Okay, gotcha. Wow, that that I applaud you for that, because obviously that is probably an easy way to get a lot of customers quickly, and also an easy way to trap them into an ecosystem. And so that is definitely, I think it is a choice that deserves applause, and I love it. That's amazing.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
It's and it's easy to chase the quick and easy money in stuff like this, right? Like
Yeah,
it's
I
obvious
totally
you're not
agree.
doing that.
You want to do the right thing, and I think it pays off in the long run. For example, as I said, there are lots and lots of service providers who offer Nextcloud. And lately at our conference that we did last fall, we got the feedback by some people that, hey, it's really hard to move from one service provider to another because some of them don't give you access to the file system or to the database. So you cannot really
Sure.
take your stuff and move it somewhere else, lock you in. Then, for example, then we decided, okay, that's not good. So in the next release that comes out very soon, or maybe already is out when you hear this podcast, we introduce a super powerful import-export feature where you can really
Awesome.
import-export everything from the web interface. So it's basically guaranteed that as a user, you always have the freedom to take the stuff with you. If you decided to go with a service provider and this organization becomes evil or don't like it anymore, you can always export it and import it in somewhere else, and then you can just go on. And these are some things that doesn't really directly give us any revenue, right? But it's just the right thing to do. I mean, we want to have a tool that empowers our users, and I am fully convinced that this will then also come back to us in a positive way, because happy users, then we're also happy.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's so cool. Okay. So speaking of your next release, and just kind of I will give you the floor kind of at the end here to just say, like, what is next? Like, what should we look for coming next in the context of like digital sovereignty, Nextcloud, like whatever you want to tell us about. I'll let you tell us about, Frank, because I feel like
Yeah,
there's probably a lot coming, right?
there's a lot coming. Yes, we do 3 really big releases every year, so there's always
Okay.
constant news. I don't want to spoil anything here. This is something I personally don't really like, because then you have marketing promises and then later you get a software and software is not doing what is
Sure.
promised. And I don't really like this too much. So, but we produce a very nice release video every time. It's on PeerTube or on YouTube, and we really show you all the cool new features. But this is also at the exact same day when the software is available. Right? So we never do any pre-announcements, and I recommend everybody who is interested to watch that. Um, but from a direction perspective, of course, we will keep on investing in performance. There's actually a lot in the next release where it makes it faster than investing in security. For example, we do a big push to make our end-to-end encryption better. There's a big effort for the last release. And then, of course, just the functionality and the usability of the system, because it needs to be fun to use it. And these are basically the main areas.
Yeah, for sure. And I have one last thing. I just looked at my notes and I totally missed this, is the Digital Sovereignty Index, which is something I found while trolling through your website. Like,
Yeah.
I love this site. Like, this is so cool. You're basically using Shodan to find how much like self-hosted infrastructure every country has. And it's
Mhm.
not great, we'll say.
Yeah, this was an interesting small project we did last year. So we are looking for for services hosted in the IP space of the different countries. And it doesn't need to be self-hosted, right? It can also be company offering a service or university offering a service or something, but a service that's running in this IP space of a country. And then we can basically count, okay, here in whatever Austria, they have so many services running, and in Switzerland, so many services. And then we basically put this into relation with the size of the country. And then we calculate this index, which basically says like, hey, how much of the essential services and data is in the country and how much is outside the country, basically. So that's
And
the
you,
idea
got,
behind
you have
it.
a nice map. I can click the map, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of red on that map, but that's all right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan, a huge fan of decentralization. I mean, the internet was built in a decentralized way. Everybody could host a mail service. Everybody could host an FTP server, host like a website wherever they want, right? This is how the internet was built. And nowadays we have just more and more centralized services that only exist once by some gigantic corporation. And this is at the end what we want to change.
Yeah, and I love that, right? I think you're right. That is how the internet was built, and I would love to see it. I guess here's how I will end it, and I would value your thought on this. Is if we talked 2 years ago or maybe 3 years ago, and you would have told me, oh, we're going to centralize the internet, like we're going to give the power back to individuals and organizations and stuff, I'd be like, this guy's off his rocker. Like, no way. And now we're talking and I'm like, holy crap. Like, I feel like this is 100% not just the right thing to do, but it is totally happening right now.
Well, thanks a lot for your optimism, but of course we are still the absolute underdog, right?
Yes.
I don't know how our market share compared to Microsoft is like 0.01% or something.
Right,
I don't know.
For sure.
So it's like there's still a long way to go. But more and more people understand that this is actually a good thing to be in control of your data.
Yeah. No, yes, I agree. It is a long, long path. We all have to travel for this. But I also feel like there's something in the air that wasn't in the air before. And there's, again, a multi-day conversation as to why that is. But all right, Frank. I love it. I guess let's close it down by just tell us, what are the next things you want us to do to either get involved or give it a try, or what's next for us as listeners to this conversation?
Well, there are a lot of things you can do. Of course, you can watch our nice announcement videos to just get an impression what Nextcloud actually is. I mean, I would recommend for everybody for the first step. Then, of course, you can play with it. You can just download it and install it wherever you want. If you know a little bit about Docker, then it's easy, as you said.
Honestly, you don't even need to know about Docker. Like, you give us the command. You just need a machine with Docker, and it'll work.
It's true. But I don't know if I would recommend someone to actually host Nextcloud if they have absolutely no clue about the internet. But
I'll agree with that. But you can at least try it out.
Yeah, exactly. Then just the next recommendation would be to try it out. And then, of course, if you're a developer, we are super open, welcoming community. As I said, thousands of people. You can help giving feedback, like helping with translations or small fixes or whatever. And we also, as Nextcloud, we attend a lot of events. So we will also be at a lot of the open source events in the US, outside the US this year. And just come by and say hello, and everybody's welcome.
Awesome. Frank, I want to thank you so much for the time. I learned a ton. This is a great conversation, and I can't wait to have you back someday once we've, you've taken over the world. I look forward to it.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah. Thanks a lot for your time. Thanks for the invitation.